There was this talk about profiling at the airports, a big controversy about profiling people with Middle Eastern descent. Like that was something of a big issue right after 2020. It's like, okay, we have these people who are potentially carriers of radical Islam. They're mind virus carriers. You see what they've done? Mind virus carriers of a specific variant need to be quarantined, and then you have to use enhanced interrogation to find out where it came from and trace it, or if they even have it. Do they have this ideology? Now, when 2020 rolled around, we were all considered to be terrorists. We were all super spreaders, but now instead of a mind virus, it was a virus. But instead of sending us all to FEMA camps or Guantanamo, we had ubiquitous home incarceration. Enhanced interrogation, yeah, PCR test. But what they did is they got us to accept the premise that we were all guilty until proven innocent, unhealthy, infectious, until considered healthy. McDirtywork says, in order for us to preserve your freedoms, we need to take some of your freedoms. Well, this is where they're leading us to, because Donald Trump tweets out an image, or truthed out an image of himself with a baseball bat. And adjacent to that picture was D.A. Elvin Bragg. I'm like, wow, that to me is a threat. Whether it's a gun or a bat or a raised fist, that's an obvious threat. I'm surprised. But the point of it is, if anything happens, real or fake, good luck showing anybody it's fake, because they're all going to now say, oh, that was caused by Trump. They use suggestion, they plant seeds, and this stochastic terror narrative gives them room to run psyops without question. All right, we started out today talking about the school. Again, the address was on a 33 teachers, 3 young, 3 old that were shot.
Okay, we are live here, solstice 2023, summer solstice 621, entering Cancer, the sign of the crab, which gives you the 6-9 symbol. And we're going to analyze the symbolism behind the ship Titanic, which is sinking during the 111th anniversary year of the original Titanic. 12 hours left until they run out of oxygen, according to official estimates. But the title of today's live stream goes a little deeper than just an accident or a lost submersible. Sun sits still for James Cameron's Titanic 2 live. And the premise I'm stating here is that I think this is a psyop. I think it's beyond any doubt now. And I think James Cameron's the director. And I think this is Titanic 2. And I want to get into all of this and the details. I sent out live stream notifications. Joined here by HLG from Kick, Rocco, Benton, GCF, R. Cook, Glenn Clark, 737, AJ206, Osher, Rocco Calzone, Junders, Into the Break, Demetra 101. Shout out to Osher, appreciate the Ko-Fi support there. That's how I actually re-upped on our credits. So if you're getting the penguin signal, it's because somebody's being paid to send out those tweets. It's like a credit per person. It kind of adds up, but it's worth it. To me, it's just advertising. But all the money that you send in, it pretty much just goes to bringing other people into the chat room. So if you want to support that, just go to ips.monster. Penguin Doctor says, signal received. Awesome. Demetria 101 says, 101 days until the end of the year after 9/11. 9/11 was the 254th day. I thought it was 110, which makes a lot of sense if you consider the height of the towers. But now, let me go through just a list of topics and subjects here. I think everyone knows the main story. But let me go through my recent tweets, and then I'm going to go through the list which I sent out to everyone on the newsletter about the things that I think are worth talking about. Again, 12 hours until it runs out. Now, let me go ahead and go to the original breaking story as we broke it. I actually called it Titanic 2 when it first was reported, because it looked to me like this was definitely a psyop. And James Cameron has been a subject of this channel for some time. We've been talking about the work of Cameron ever since, I guess it was the Avatar 2 is what really brought him to the center here. And if you haven't seen Avatar 2, it's basically to give the present generation the blue marble experience, becoming aware of the earth as a singular entity imperiled by man, alone and suspended in space in need of protection. That's the basis for the environmentalist movement when they first showed off the blue marble. Well, they had to kind of re-up that, but they didn't just do another blue marble. What they did is they brought you the movie Avatar 2, all blue, very immersive. And the whole premise of it is we are connected to Gaia, that we are, in other words, there's a sentience to the planet. And they've correlated this Gaia with the World Economics Forum Global AI Alliance. But now let's get right into this topic because this is happening now. There's like 12 hours left. I Can't Breathe happens to be one of the meanings behind Cameron's Avatar 2. Gaia can't breathe. In fact, Gaia is going to be killed by us, and so we're going to have to go to Pandora and take over that place. And the scientists don't want you to know that Gaia is sentient. The whole I Can't Breathe Marxist slogan was actually part of the environmentalist slogan this whole time, trying to make us think that capitalism not only puts its knee on the neck of the poor, but it's actually suffocating Gaia. So it's perfectly consistent with this bigger story that the main thing here is asphyxiation. And there are other elements to this as we will get to, but this is 100% fake in my opinion based on the level of scripting. Now let's go right into what I put in the newsletter about this thing. And I have a list. Again, I put a list down of things that I think stand out. For one, the fact that James Cameron, and this is a pop quiz, how many times did James Cameron go down to visit the wreckage of the Titanic? If you have a guess, go ahead and put it in the chat below. How many times did James Cameron go down to visit the wreckage of the Titanic? Again, today is solstice. The sun sits still for James Cameron's Titanic 2. Solstice means still sun or sun still. And it happens for the winter, and this is the summer solstice. And for the winter solstice, the sun hangs on the Southern Cross for 3 days. Right now in the summer solstice, the crab, which moves sideways, the sun is almost stationary. So it's like the crab's moving sideways or it's still for 3 days. Same thing. Yeah, if you answered 33, Benton, Scotty Smith, Into the Break, Shannon Jones, Erto, you all get a sticker, a penguin sticker with the 33 on it. We'll have to make some. We have a plan to actually send out these like stickers for those who guess first on these pop quizzes. But yes, James Cameron, and there's nothing suspicious about this. You know, I'm not trying to say it means anything, but it's, because these are just what we would call coincidences, right? No way this is indicative of some deeper level of planning. No way. While Cameron, or Camera On, which I think is part of his code name, he is so prevalent within this PSYOP entertainment complex, our world filtered through Big Brother's camera. While Cameron has not publicly commented on the current search for the Titanic Tour Ocean Gate submersible with 5 people on board, he has personally made 33 dives to the wreckage site. Now, Ocean Gate should stand out to you. Last year we spoke about Watergate and how it connects to Stranger Things, which has a Watergate where the Demogorgon is. The Demogorgon, the Kraken, these things are all going to show up in the course of this conversation. By the way, once you're 3,333 feet deep, go 3,333.33 feet deep, there's no more light. That's when it gets dark, 1,000 meters. But yes, James Cameron, Mr. Way of Water, has not publicly commented on this yet, but he has visited the wreckage 33 times. Does not sound like a coincidence to me. This is, again, scripted. And let me bring this up, too. The reason why we started talking about him is Pete Shea was like, hey, you got to look into this. James Cameron spent time in a submarine at the wreckage of the Titanic, and he was there at 9/11. On 9/11, 2001. And this is incredible because it creates this perfect correlation between the Twin Towers and the Titanic. The Titanic is a metaphor for the ship of state, the West. The Titanic breaking in two, very significant here. In his movie, It looks like 9/11 jumpers when one part of it goes up and it capsizes. But Twin Towers sinking after their 33 years is another 33 connection. Of course, James Cameron having been down there 33 times because he was filming a documentary called Ghosts of the Abyss. And that's where he was on 9/11. Well, Revelation 9/11 has been brought up oftentimes around this conversation, and it has to do with the angel of the bottomless pit. In Hebrew, destruction, or Apollyon in Greek, or Abaddon. So you have this name, and it all correlates, I think, to this challenger concept. The challenger that's going to, as you'll see, the story as it's evolving. But anyway, Revelation 9/11 is about the abyss and the challenger in the abyss. Well, James Cameron is in a craft called the Deep Sea Challenger on 9/11, filming a movie called The Abyss, Ghosts of the Abyss. So that's a pretty strong correlation there. And that's just the beginning. That's just part of it. I mean, we all know the significance of James Cameron's work, Terminator 2, all the time travel stuff, Los Angeles getting the nuke. It's all going to be relevant here. And there are other things as well that really cement this. In fact, we're talking about the creature in the abyss. Well, Jaws, and this is a shout out to Synchro Morpheus, he posted this in our Gilded. If you want to get into Gilded, go to ips.monster and join the Patreon. Jaws was released 48 years ago today. Now again, Titanic sank 111 years ago. Jaws released 48 years ago. That's kind of interesting. Today though, this is actually today. And the significance here, of course, is Jaws represents the creature of the deep, the destroyer, the beast in the pit, this kraken, and that we've been discussing. And okay, the name Apollyon also, which is also kind of notable because this event has been compared, like the deep sea Atlantic is like being in space. And we've been comparing this to Apollo 13. And even the capsule being lost in the abyss and a few days of uncertainty. Again, Jaws coming out today, not a coincidence. And if you look at the shape of Ocean Gate, or of the Titan by Ocean Gate, it actually does have a shark-like shape. Of course, it has the name Cyclops, which is a connection to Poseidon and Odysseus. You know, Odysseus trying to outsmart Poseidon. JT says the Titanic is the Olympic. Yeah, well, the Titan and the Titanic, yes, this is all getting into the various symbols they use, the various gods and archetypes that they use to tell their stories, and their modern counterparts like Jaws or Godzilla. I mean, Cameron's been down there 33 times. What's the significance to the abyss? What does that mean? Well, the new Godzilla movie, he's stored at sub-level 33. They make a point to emphasize that. And I think I know what it means. Without getting into the esoteric side, I'm just pointing it out. There's a pattern here. Godzilla was born on 11/3. And that date, which is like a holiday in Japan, is a significant date with this building Kraken narrative, this thing from the abyss. And 11/3 is the date that the One World Trade Tower opened, 13 years after the twins went down. So there's another correlation there. By the way, there's a trailer for a movie that just came out called Challengers by Zendaya. No, Zendaya holds court over a love triangle. Yeah, his latest movie, Challenger. So I've been correlating this thing with the Challenger, as you'll see why. Okay, now let's continue with this. This is why I said sun stands still. 6-9 is the symbol of Cancer. Today's the first day of Cancer, and you can correlate the crustacean, the crab, with a submarine. And the word kraken relates here. In fact, the kraken was originally represented as a big crab, the Norse one. But the whole point of it is the solstice means sun still, and we're sitting still. The world's sitting still watching James Cameron's latest flick. So we're kind of unpacking the symbolism here. It's very significant that the one explorer with the initials HH is an astronaut. He's been to the South Pole, so he's been as high as, he's been to the edge of space, bottom of the ocean, bottom of the ball. But the fact that he's an astronaut is key here. And I'm watching this Netflix show, Black Mirror, season 2, and I'm on the episode called Beyond the Sea, which already sounds like concurrent programming, Beyond the Sea. And the characters are in a craft that, they're in a space station, but the scene looks like it's the same submarine, the same submersible. And Beyond the Sea is about a tragedy where someone's a million miles away. There's some parallel storylines here, but the symbolism there Beyond the Sea, and I haven't finished it yet, so I fell asleep, but I noted some similarities, and I posted it over on my Minds and over in Discord. And now there's more too. I think this has all the markings of a tragedy that's being manufactured, like the Challenger. Remember the Challenger? They had the first black astronaut and a woman teacher, and they blew them up. Well, there was some talk here about how the person behind this, the company, wanted a diverse crew, and they put diversity over anything. They said that nobody cares or nobody's inspired by 50-year-old white guys. So they brought in identity politics into this. And I thought, why would they do that? And the right, of course, is pointing out, saying, this is what happens when you don't put merit first. And I'm just saying, no, this is because they want to make sure that this manufactured tragedy appeals to all the right demographics. It's also interesting that they're billionaires. I'm seeing a lot of comments there about this. Okay, continuing. Now, again, Beyond the Sea has another interesting connection here, because no spoilers, but Beyond the Sea, you have these astronauts who are deep in space, but they have avatars to interact on Earth. So you have the avatar concept, which is straight out of the James Cameron's world. So again, the tragedy happens a million miles away. It looks the same, just some more concurrent programming. Okay, continuing on this line here. Now, it is a big deal, if you ask me, that the name Challenger keeps showing up, because I think it's part of the same story. And by the way, the Challenger blew up 1 minute and 13 seconds into its flight, another 113. Harding previously accompanied Vescovo on another deep dive as part of the Challenger Deep expedition at the Mariana Trench in 2021. So Challenger Deep stands out here. Again, Hamish Harding, 88, or HH, which is, I'm pointing it out because if you look at predictive programming for the Twin Towers coming down, it is replete with 88s. So there's something here. I think there were 88 lights that they use for the memorial, the Towers of Light. So that's another connection here. Again, Hamish Harding, missing Titanic visitor, knew that it had 4 days of oxygen, 96 hours, they keep saying. And I think 9/6 might be another way of referencing 6/9 or Cancer or the solstice. But yeah, he used the Challenger Deep. So again, the name Challenger being referenced again and again cannot be a coincidence. Jack Posebek said, Titan Sub, OceanGate CEO didn't want to hire 50-year-old white guys like other submarine companies because they're not inspirational. Like I said, it's a psyop to create martyrs. Look at the demographic breakdown of the Challenger victims, who are all still alive, by the way. Now, let me bring back this. So if you look at pictures of the Apollo 13, it's kind of similar. We have this essentially a hermetically sealed craft in space. It looks just like a submarine, but it's in space. And this correlation between space and the ocean is intriguing. Think about the movie The Titanic, starring Leonardo DiCaprio. Major league environmentalist, minuscule feat, and despite his literal tiny footprints, he'll never make up for his gigantic carbon footprint with his mega yacht. He's basically living an Al Gore-like lifestyle. And Greta's never called him out like she called out Andrew Tate. Like, why don't they ever call out their own? She calls out Andrew Tate for his 33 Bugattis. And like, she never calls out the people that, she's probably worse than he is, if you think about her own carbon footprint. But anyway, because, he just got out of jail. And I've been saying, we got to lock up these climate activists because they're just traveling everywhere, making a mess of things. Lock up Greta. Lock her up. Now, okay, Apollo 13. Again, 13, the number, has to do with death, rebirth, and that's a big part of this story overall. 13 years after the towers, we have the one tower. But Apollo 13 was the 7th crewed mission in the Apollo space program, and the 3rd one meant to land on the moon. It launched from the Kennedy Space Center April 11th, 1970, but it was aborted because the oxygen tank failed 2 days into the mission. So you have another I can't breathe kind of setup with Apollo 13. Now listen to this. Last night, the U.S. Coast Guard estimated the 22-foot-long OceanGate expeditions had just over 40 hours of oxygen left. The 5 on board, which include British billionaire adventurer Hamish Harding, remain in the dark depths of the Atlantic. which experts have likened to being in space. Now, again, we're talking about a production by James Cameron. And I'm talking about it in this context because all of this stuff ties into it. Atlantic. Now you have the Avatar 2 Way of Water, which is basically about Atlantean, like Na'vi characters, these water people. But what's more, after that movie comes out, you have these protests in Atlanta, where it's the environmentalists defending the forest against the cops who want to cut it down and build a training camp. They call it Cop City. Well, the Cop City PSYOP, which even had an environmentalist martyr who got shot through the palms of his hands, stigmata like Jesus, and then they marched with Black Lives Matter, merging of the two. So you had a tree superimposed, or rather a black fist superimposed over a tree for the world tree. But this, again, Atlanta was the center of this because they're making the point here that the environmentalists and the Marxists have the same enemy. It's our capitalist system. Not only can the poor not breathe, but Gaia can't breathe. That's been the point they've been making. They merged it this year. So the Atlanta-Atlantic connection here is just something else worth pointing out. Again, the missing Titanic, people are saying it was rigged because it had a PlayStation 3 controller. No, there's nothing wrong with that per se. But if you look at the pictures of this Titanic from the inside, it does look exactly like Beyond the Sea, and you can find the pictures at my Minds account. But the Ocean Gate thing I think is big because, again, we're talking about this repeated phrase. Last year it was all about the Watergate. Abseed says, is the lost sub some sort of tsunami creation machine? Well, there is something to this. And by the way, as we speak, I believe Putin is threatening to deploy the world's most powerful nuke. He said that today. Satan 2. Satan 2 is ready for combat duty to take out the West. So just a heads up here. Operational range, 11,000 miles. Deadly missiles reported to have no equivalent. It's 116 feet in length. There's your 116 again. How many times have we said 116 is correlated with the nuke? I said the Oppenheimer movie. It's 11 miles long, 600 pounds. The 6/11, 11/6 thing has been connected with domestic violent extremist attacks. The Batman movie had the dam break when the Riddler sent out his extremists to blow up the dam, flood the poles on 11/6. Gotham goes underwater. Interesting, right? 116 feet. And then 11 miles, 600 pounds. So many fascinating coincidences to go through. Got a tweet from Les Luther. Theatricity and deception are powerful tools. I feel folks on here don't comprehend how powerful. Right. He observes a lot of the truthers on Twitter. And look, Twitter is flooded with agents and disinformation, misinformation. And I think they're trying to drown out auto-hoaxing with auto-disbelief. Just rejecting it, calling it fake without knowing how to call it fake. And it's easy to say, oh, this is staged. Sure, it's very easy. But there are so many stories attached to this thing that I think we can be pretty definitive in saying so. Oh, and by the way, I think the world is supposed to end today, June 21st. Greta Thunberg actually tweeted this June 21st, 2018. Top climate scientist warns that climate change will wipe out humanity unless we stop using fossil fuels over the next 5 years. So today's the last day. Again, we're talking about the submersible. Less than 12 hours left as of right now. This is a comment from Intel Cheetah. Quote, this is giving me Apollo 13 vibes. Yeah, by design. I think by design. Now, there are signs of life. They did hear banging noises at 30-minute intervals. However, it doesn't mean anything yet. I think that this standstill is on purpose, this delay, the 3 days, it's to correspond to Cancer. Again, I think Cancer and the solstice are perfectly timed with this, as this submersible represents, or Cancer and the submersible are analogous symbols here. If you have anything else to add, please post a link here. I got a tweet here from Eric Iso, said, remember the Chilean miners. This too must be a ritual. The numbers, the names, and the fact that it's the summer solstice will reveal more. Yes, good points there. And yes, that's right. We had the Phoenix, the rescue device called Phoenix, that was used to rescue those miners. And I think there were all kinds of 33s around that one as well. Again, the rescue mission is still underway for the missing submersible with 5 people on board. I think this is a manufactured Challenger-like event, and I think James Cameron is the director. Now let me scroll through my notes here. Deep Sea Challenger, we talked about that. Twin Towers, Ghosts of the Abyss, Revelations, 9/11, 33 trips to the Titanic, Way of Water. Now here's an interesting piece. This is a collection of names of shuttles from William Cooper. Columbian endeavor to discover Atlantis. Challengers will be destroyed. Like that's a message being conveyed in a metascript fashion that he had pointed out. One of the main characters here is Hamish Harding, HH, astronaut, South Pole explorer, Deep Sea Challenger. So he's the Deep Sea Challenger. James Cameron, in the Deep Sea Challenger, this is like the story. I think it's connected to this bigger picture of this Kraken thing that has been consistently being brought up. And Challenger Deep, again, Abyss, Ghosts in the Abyss is the name of his film. We talked about the connection between Ocean Gate and Demogorgon from Stranger Things, which has to do with this Russian thing that they create. And here, the nuke Satan II is being waved around by Putin right now. Not a coincidence. This has Hunt for Red October vibes, the lost submarine being correlated. And last year, when the Rush shooting happened, we were breaking down all the various elements to the Rush shooting, how it brought in Hunt for Red October, and how it brought in this Russia thing. And at that time, Putin was talking about Satan II, which is now ready to be deployed. So it is interesting here that we have a missing sub at the time where that is being brought up again. We talked about the space comparisons between the deep Atlantic and outer space, Apollo 13. And think about this, Apollyon is another name for Abaddon, or the destroyer in the abyss, right? Well, Apollo 13 in the abyss. So there's another space, ocean correlation. And what's more, underwater aliens, the abyss. Deep space aliens, aliens. James Cameron's theme has been aliens, deep space, and deep in the abyss. So there's another interesting connection here. The Apollo 13 vessel looking like a sub, and here's a quote, Atlantic likened to being in space. Now, I think that there might be something here with the sinking of the Titanic representing the sinking of Atlantis, or the flooding of Atlantis, and Atlantis being America, according to Sir Francis Bacon, according to Manly P. Hall, that the secret destiny of America is to be a phoenix, to be destroyed. But anyway, there might be some symbolism in this. Talked about Somewhere Beyond the Sea, a Black Mirror episode, similar submarine. It looks like the inside of their space station. Tragic deaths millions of miles away. Asphyxiation. I Can't Breathe. Gaia Can't Breathe in Avatar. Oh yeah, somewhere, this Beyond the Sea has an Avatar storyline, but it's not a Cameron, but it ties in. All of this stuff does. Again, we're talking about also the significance of Cameron's work, Avatar 2, as reintroducing blue marble and this Earth consciousness, Gaia can't breathe, Cop City being protested. Okay, so I think we've covered most of the notes that really stood out here. Different key points. Let me see what we have in our chats. Linda Curtis says it's been 111 years since the Titanic sank. Copaesthetic says Broken Arrow 33 all day for sure. Yes, there's been 32 Broken Arrow events. These are nukes that are missing or possibly a threat, possibly stolen. We're waiting on number 33. Angle of Elevation says we need the aliens to save our sub. Right. Yeah, there might be something to this. The idea of alien saviors when we reach the... I don't know if this has a happy ending, though. I think this might actually be a disaster, but instead of the Challenger blowing up with fire, it's the asphyxiation. And this is the theme of Gaia, which was asphyxiated by man, by billionaires, by the rich, and all these, the wrong people in charge of the church, of the ship estate. And this story of the Titanic, again, the movie has the predictive stuff in it, which is worth looking at, but this story was brought back with Don't Look Up. And Don't Look Up was not only correlating Earth with the Titanic and the comet with an iceberg, but it had Leonardo DiCaprio at the helm to create that association. But they blamed billionaires for destroying the world, for trying to mine the comet instead of deflecting it. So it had this kind of a moral to it, but Don't Look Up is also telling you don't question the priesthood, don't question science, don't look up the information for yourself. Erica Bear says, did you talk about how the missing billionaire also went to space? Yes. The fact that he went to space is a huge red flag. It means that he's part of the PSYOP entertainment complex. James Cameron has been working with NASA for years. I'm saying that this is James Cameron's Titanic 2. And it's happening live. Yes, Zareth the Alchemist says, don't do your own research. Rocco Calzone says, Challenger explosion versus submarine implosion. Very good. All Challengers must be destroyed. And again, this is definitely so replete with symbolism that I think it's fair to say we're deconstructing the storyline behind a PSYOP more than anything else here. This is not an accident. This is not a tragedy. Okay, Ocean Gate. Again, the connection here between these ongoing stories is pretty incredible. The fact that Jaws was released 48 years ago today, big deal, very big deal. Titanic tourist submarine missing with 5 on board only has, originally it kept reporting 96 hours. So by the time we're live again tomorrow, there will be some significant developments here. Will this be an Apollo 13? Will this be something with a happy ending? Maybe they can put Tom Hanks in there. All the Right Moves just tweeted, Jaws was released 48 years ago, regardless of the first summer, is the first summer blockbuster. The making of the story is so crazy, it begs the question of how it was ever made. All right, well, again, I think that Jaws is just in the way of representing this Kraken thing, whatever it happens to be. And we talk about this a lot, and it's notable that, you know, the place where NASA dumps its spent satellites is called Point Nemo. It's the most, it's actually called the pole of accessibility. It's the place that's furthest removed from any human habitation. Supposedly, this is where they drop all their satellites. So they call it the spacecraft cemetery. And this is the exact place where H.P. Lovecraft claims the elder gods, or the old ones, landed. And they have a city down there. He calls it City of the Dead. Now, I'm like, okay, you have a correlation between H.P. Lovecraft's science fiction and between NASA's science fiction, or reality, depending on how in the know you are. And this is also where Jules Verne placed 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea. And of course, he's very significant with science fiction and the first one to conceptualize a trip to the moon, Jules Verne. But my point is, it's the same place. City of the Dead, where Cthulhu is, the big Kraken-like deity or entity. It's where NASA drops their satellites. So we have satellites falling from the sky, aliens falling from the sky, and then Point Nemo, the point where this Jules Verne has this deep sea exploration. Now I'm bringing this up because H.P. Lovecraft, beyond just being, science fiction horror, his canon of books, his fiction, was actually grafted into the inner teachings of the OTO, the Thelemic cult. Aleister Crowley's cult, basically after he died, became centered around this particular concept, this Kraken thing, this thing at the ocean that Lovecraft, they believed, was channeling information about something that was really there. So I'm pointing it out that it's very significant because if Thelema, if this occult religion is behind the New Age philosophy in all these occult rituals that we see, which I think it is, then we could, I think we can definitively state that they worship Apollyon, they worship Abaddon, they worship the beast of the abyss, or whatever it is down there, the Kraken. That's one of their gods. Just saying, that's by their own books. The person who took over or was the figurehead for the OTO after Crowley was a guy named Kenneth Grant. And if you go through his books, you'll find this fusion of Lovecraftian ideas and the Lovecraftian mythos. But this all ties into Revelation 9:11 and this angel of the bottomless pit. And again, this ties into the Ocean Gate and the Demogorgon from Russia, Stranger Things. And I think we could also correlate it with Poseidon and opening the gate and unleashing the Kraken in the movie. So it's, again, very significant here. Linda Curtis says, we live in a PlayStation. Zareth says, Poseidon is the underwater devil. Psyopsicle says, 2023 Titanic sub is related to the Federal Reserve sinking as a reserve currency. You know, the day this thing was sinking, they said something about, the same day, there was a 33-year-old who fell from the skywalk into the Grand Canyon. And I thought someone had brought that up in Discord, and we were like, what's the symbol here? What is sinking? Because this is all symbolic. Diana Southard says, maybe they're in Atlantis. Zareth says, fiction becomes reality in one generation. In one episode. If it's on TV today, it's real tomorrow. Like this is why you can't miss anything. You think you can stick your head in the sand and be uninformed and be safe, quarantine yourself from the madness? You can't. Because if you miss an episode, if you don't pay attention to what the sheeple are being brainwashed with, let's say you take a day off, you might come back and there's aliens, and you don't get time to adjust. You don't get any sort of leeway for your culture shock. You immediately just got to adjust to it. Okay, aliens now. Angled Elevation says, are Kraken, Leviathan, and Poseidon the same thing? You know, Poseidon is the name of of Russia's nuclear submarine. Undetectable, I think. Now, they're not specifically the same thing, like literally, in the way that they've been presented and where they come from, but it's called syncretism. What they do is they take various archetypes from different religious traditions and they mash them together. And this has been done for a very, very long time. So you can correlate Cthulhu with the Kraken, with Godzilla, with Leviathan, with Poseidon, with this Hunt for Red October submarine. You can correlate it in the way they're telling stories because they're basic symbols. And again, today is the first day of Cancer, the crab, and it's very significant, again, that they're in what is symbolically, I think, a crab, a crustacean. And this is the period where the sun sits still. That's what solstice means. So the world is sitting still as we're watching this drama from James Cameron unfold. In addition to Avatar 2, we talk about Terminator 2. And the 2s are very significant here. And this is Titanic 2. But in Terminator 2, you have the Savior, John Connor, JC, Jesus Christ. And the Terminator represents a couple of things here. It represents the Saturnian, like Darth Vader killing Luke, Saturn killing the sun, Saturn the Lord of Night. And if you look at the ball Earth from space, it's always bisected, light and dark. That line that cuts it in half, that's the Terminator line. Now, I think it's a hoax. I don't believe in Terminator lines. I don't think there's evidence for it, but let's just pretend. In this world that we're in, it is make-believe, this PlayStation world, there's a line, and that line separates day and night. And that sunset represents Set, the Prince of Darkness, killing the sun, or JC, and the Terminator. And that's even the T2. Just look at the symbol. The T is across the two. Put them together. The astrological symbol of Saturn is always represented covertly by a 42. That's why they put it there. Just bringing it up because they use modern media, modern entertainment to bring back their old gods. The obelisk that they worship as a symbol of the resurrection of this deity has been brought back to us as the rocket. And of course, the rocket traveling to space is, well, space, the sky, the goddess Isis, you see. So it's the earth god and the sky goddess and their conjugal visit, their nightly visit where they conceive and give birth to Horus the next morning, the sun rising. So it's all personification. They use different ways of presenting it to us. If you watch Star Wars, you saw this basic myth. When Darth cuts off Luke's sword hand, that represents the dismemberment of Osiris. That's why Luke hangs from a cross in Cloud City right after, until he has it reattached. It's all, again, templated off of something much older. Just like the Bible, many of its stories, Old Testament, come from things much older. And today, and this is very significant to James Cameron's work, NOAA, the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, is a modern-day counterpart to the biblical Noah, also symbolized by the dove. And these are reset symbols. I'm talking about like the sinking of Atlantis or the Great Reset. The phoenix symbol is something we often see associated with a reset, burn down, build back better. In this case, the case of Noah's flood, it's flooded out, and then they build back better from whatever's in the ark. Well, today you have the same Noah telling us, if you don't cut your wickedness, if you don't cut your fossil fuels, you're all going to basically be flooded. Rocco Calzone says, I'll be back, Terminator line. Yep. And the Terminator, or Arnold Schwarzenegger, is behind this World War Zero initiative. They want to cut mankind's carbon footprint in half by 2030. Linda Curtis says, Cloud City significant, sinks sinking. Oh yes, absolutely. And then he has his hand reattached. That's my point here is, and you can further correlate Darth Vader with Saturn just by looking at the Death Star. The Death Star looks exactly like Saturn's moon, Mimas. Now, isn't Saturn's other moon Titan? Psyopsical says, exit fossil fuels or get mud flooded. Yep. Yeah, Saturn's largest moon is Titan. Earth-like cycle of liquids flowing across its surface. It's the only moon with a thick atmosphere. You know what its atmosphere is made out of? CGI. It's possible. If we are living in a sim, if this is a PlayStation universe, as Linda Curtis suggests, then I think that once you go 62 miles up, once you hit that Kármán line, it turns into pixels. Like you look at yourself in the mirror, you look like a Minecraft character. Like it's all sim at that point. That would explain the glitches we see on the ISS. They're not faking it. The reason why you see all this pixelation isn't because they're trying to hoax us and fake space. It's because space is actually CGI. Zaret says, screw your freedoms, Arnold. Well, look, Arnold apologized for that, and he's done some penance. I've seen Arnold filling in potholes in his neighborhood on TikTok. I'm sure he wasn't doing it just a virtue signal. Now, on June 19th, early in the morning, I sent out a breaking press release from Infinite Plane Media. This is why you should sign up at infiniteplanesociety.com. It was breaking Titanic Part 2. Submersible taking tourists to the Titanic reported missing in the Atlantic. I called it the Titanic Part 2 before the Drudge Report did. But this story is huge from a Metascript perspective. The symbol of the Titanic is powerful in itself, emblematic of the ship of state, steered by greedy and powerful fools. And we've discussed before its correlation to the Twin Towers. And I just found out today that Satan 2, and we talked about Terminator 2. Terminator 2 has the nuke that blows up. It's in Los Angeles, but it focuses on a sea turtle, which I actually think is a Seattle reference. But Cameron's work here is what we've been talking about, and what the symbol of the Titanic. This is one of the point. It's a metaphor for the sinking of the West. So here you have Putin with Satan 2 threatening to sink the West. And this correlates with the crumbling of the World Trade Center. And I actually have on my Substack, if you went to my latest blog, I have a link in Titanic. The actual movie from 1997 is linked there, just the clip where you can see it breaks up into two. Terminator 2 is connected with 9/11 predictive programming. In the original timeline, Judgment Day occurs on August 29th, 1997. Skynet was activated on 8/4/1997. Someone needs to tell JL-42. It became self-aware, and it launched nuclear missiles at Russia to incite a counterattack against humans. So that's kind of the storyline here, Russia, nukes, and Judgment Day. And speaking of Judgment Day, Donald Trump launches his campaign in Waco. Waco, An American Apocalypse, was released that day on Netflix, and he says this is our final battle. I mean, we've had a lot of apocalyptic rhetoric all over the place. Okay, going through your comments. Angled Elevation says Biden wants no new combustion engines for cars by 2035. There's no way there's enough electricity for that. But if the world population is only 500 million, now that's interesting. Well, good luck with that. The instructions for bringing man to heal were written in stone, and the Georgia Guidestones, and they were meant to survive an apocalypse. But somebody put a cherry bomb on top of it the summer before last and blew it up. So 42 years they stood, and there are no more Georgia Guidestones. And I don't believe there's going to be any depopulation, because they've been talking about the population bomb and overpopulation for so many decades now that it's almost like if they really wanted to do something about it, they would have taken care of it decades ago. Like, it's too late. And I think that the reason why they want you to think there's too much of us is because they want to inculcate our entire culture with self-hate, self-loathing. It's part of this mortification of the flesh taught by many religions, because we are living in a new religious paradigm. It's full of superstitions, mythologies. It's got its priesthoods, has its counterparts for sin, original sin, for heaven, which is space, for transcendence, transhumanism. Angels are now aliens. But, we're in a new religious paradigm from top to bottom, and they need you to hate yourself. They need you to hate the fact that you breathe, because you're making God mad, God being their God construct, Gaia. You want to hate the capitalists because they're going to kill Gaia. The Avatar 2 was about, it has the scientist played by Sigourney Weaver, who says that Earth was sentient. And this is a big secret, because if the public knew that Earth was sentient, they wouldn't let us drill it. They wouldn't let us destroy it. And this was the premise behind Pandora and man having to go parasitically to go harvest from another place. This whole story is very fascinating. You have to remember, when Avatar 2 came out, the World Economic Forum was having its meeting, and there were all kinds of floods everywhere. Ellen DeGeneres was like, look at my house, it's flooding. They were really focusing on floods. And that kind of got forgotten about, and then it went into train derailments. Then it went into random shootings. The current thing's always changing. Okay, now listen to this. This is a tie-in. This is James Cameron's The Abyss. This has got to be what I'd call a concurrent programming. Yeah, The Abyss is a 1989 science fiction film directed by Cameron, starring Ed Harris. Very interesting actor there for all of his roles in a lot of these psyops. We often talk about the directors, the metascripters, but what about some of these actors who were in these hugely significant roles? We have to do a deep study on them as well. Okay, listen to this. We're talking about the movie The Abyss. Now this is all, I think, indicative of, again, James Cameron being the author, the writer. It's about a rescue. The deep core, the crew is waiting for rescue when they see a message from Bud that he met some friends and warns them to hold on. The base shakes and lights from the trench, heralding the arrival of the alien ship that rises to the Earth's surface. Fascinating. And that's right, this is, again, aliens in the deep, aliens in deep space. But this is the part that I think stands out. In the extended version, the events in the film are played against a backdrop between a conflict. This is concurrent, this is predictive programming, because in the extended version, while they're diving, there's a conflict between the United States and the Soviet Union. It says there's a potential for all-out war, and the sinking of the Montana fueled the aggression. The aliens create massive mega tsunamis that threaten the world's coasts, but stop them before they hit. So I guess what we're seeing here is that Russia and America are about to fight, like Putin's about to drop his Satan II, and that would create what they called, did they use the word mega tsunamis? They were talking about the Poseidon and these tsunamis that would be able to destroy the coasts. Here we go. Putin's indestructible Poseidon super torpedoes, set to be deployed by 2025. The explosion of this torpedo near the British coast would cause a giant tsunami 500 meters high. Radioactive tidal waves of death. So this was just last month, actually just last week. Poseidon can trigger enormous radioactive tsunamis that could have a huge impact on human and marine life. So this is already in the news, just within the last few days. Poseidon, radioactive mega tsunamis, and that's part of this story, the backdrop as they're diving, and the aliens get to save us. So we're still waiting on that. James Cameron's The Abyss surfaces for 4K Ultra SD Laserdisc with new 14-disc widescreen letterbox set. Did this just come out? Looks like it. So if you want to order it, you go to highdefdigest.com. James Cameron's The Abyss, and this was just a couple months ago, was released 4K. Fascinating timing. It's always like this with these various psyops. It's always like this, where somebody's making money somewhere. Somebody just published a book or is just about to release an album. All right, we're sticking to this topic right now. I mean, there's so many other things to talk about. The Tate brothers being charged with human trafficking, etc. A lot of stuff going on with the Q crowd because of a gaffe. Donald Trump was on an interview yesterday, and he's talking about, and this is on Fox News, he's talking about Robert F. Kennedy, but he accidentally calls him JFK Jr., and he says, he's a very nice person. I know him very well. Now, he was talking about Robert Kennedy, but you know how it goes. The QAnoners are convinced it was a wink. Okay, now let me bring up some more background to this. Ocean Gate is taking every step possible to bring missing submersible back. And now in Stranger Things, the Watergate, this is the thing. At the edge of Lover's Lake, there's an underwater portal to the Upside Down, this passageway to the Netherworld, which has a funny name, Watergate. Now, of course, that was correlated strongly last year with all the Watergate talk, 1973. Seemed to be part of the template for last summer. And, of course, the Watergate leak, which wasn't the first, it happened in 1973 as well. How Watergate opened. Did anyone else notice that right before the crew discovers Watergate, Nancy says, whenever the Demogorgon attacked, it always left an opening. Now we're talking about the Demogorgon being some creature that they fight in Russia in the Stranger Things series, where the main character is wearing, I think it's a Hulk Hogan shirt with an American flag. I mean, it's US versus Russia. And the Demogorgon represents this Kraken, the nuke, this thing. So this is a very strong connection. Zaret the Alchemist says, has anyone heard about Jamie Foxx lately? You know, speaking of Jamie Foxx, the two X's, very symbolic, because the X is a cross, and the double cross is the resurrection, second coming, like Terminator 2. And there's a lot of symbolism inherent in that. Jamie Foxx is in the news because he died and came back to life, more or less. But the timing of it, I think, was most significant. Him being 55 years old, and the number 55 has been all over the BLM martyr creation complex. Every one of their psyops has the 55 connected with it. And I think it had to do with MLK's 55th death anniversary. And here you have Jamie Foxx, very significant for BLM, which of course kicked off after Trayvon Martin, and he was one of the celebrities that helped bring this thing out and make it go mainstream. Jamie Foxx also played Django Unchained, which ties into the psyop with the 33-year-old Burning Man Christopher Dorner, among other things. But while he was in the hospital, the accuser of Emmett Till died. And so Emmett Till's death kicked off the civil rights movement. Then you had Trayvon Martin kicks off the modern BLM. So my point is, he's fine. His collapse and his death, or almost death, his near-death experience, it was all fake. And it was faked because they were bringing a bunch of pieces into the view of the public while they're telling this story. Same thing with Damar Hamlin. Like, just so you know, if somebody drops dead on TV, it's probably fake. Like prove me wrong, or find an example find the exception to that rule, please. And you'll see that it's the rule, not the exception. Okay, surprising fact, Harding has also been part of 2 record-making trips to the South Pole. The first of which was 2016 when he was joined by astronaut Buzz Aldrin. I think Buzz Aldrin's mom's maiden name was Moon. Wasn't it Marion Moon? And Mary, you know, there's just so much scripting here with every single aspect to this. In March 2021, Harding joined U.S. businessman and adventurer Victor Vescovo on a dive into the Challenger Deep, the deepest known point of the ocean's floor. So again, reiterating Challenger Deep, the abyss, and the Challenger being destroyed. There's something here. In June of last year, he was one of 5 to fly on board Jeff Bezos' Blue Origin's 5th crewed mission to space. So he's an astronaut, which means that he knows how to fake traveling into space, which means he can fake traveling into the depths of the ocean. Zaret says that overweight raptor just dropped out, hit the ground pretty hard. Okay, well, look, if X happens before Y, it doesn't mean X caused Y. If you're going to say he was killed because of a pokey that you don't know he took, you might as well say he got killed by chemtrails. And he didn't fall any harder than Heather McDonald or any of these World Wrestling Entertainment actors. Like, they know how to fall. And here's something else that I think was fake. There's a musician, a performer, her name is Rexa, and there's a video, you can see it on Twitter, where she's on stage and somebody throws a phone and hits her in the face. A preliminary investigation by New York police determined that a 27-year-old male threw a cell phone at the 33-year-old star. Rexa received EMS treatment, was taken to a hospital, according to Rolling Stones. Now, just because it's a 33 doesn't mean it's fake. However, when I look at the picture of her, she has a bit of makeup above her eye. I guess that's where the phone hit. Tape over the stitches, and she has an all-seeing eye on her ring. And her hand looks like a lobster claw, just the way her nails are. But I'm just saying, it's just kind of interesting, the one-eye symbolism, the all-seeing eye ring. She's 33. So that was probably a foam cell phone prop. That's kind of what I think it was. Kind of like the foam brick that was used to hit Reginald Denny during the LA riots. Totally fake. Brick is just a clue that the whole thing is very Masony, as we like to call it here. Jennifer Reeves says her smile was a smirk in that pic. Yes, absolutely. Okay, Putin's Poseidon and the radioactive tidal wave of death. We're still waiting for that. Aliens to come save us. Sun is sitting still for James Cameron's Titanic 2. And again, I'm intrigued when I find these connections on the fly. 116 feet long, Satan II missile being pointed at us. 116, I just said that this is going to be the number associated with the nuke attack, and it's going to be Putin working with domestic violent extremists in some way. And the 116 or the 611 has been consistently tied to this. So the fact that that's the size of the missile itself is not a coincidence. Linda Curtis says chemtrails have not been proven as to what they consist of. Oh, yes. Well, you know, the thing is, condensation trails exist. They do. And they are observable. You can test. You can make observations. You can create them. You could make your own plane in your backyard, in your garage, and you could fly up to the right altitude. And even though you don't have a contract with the secret government to dump chemicals on people, your plane will create these trails when you're high up enough during certain conditions. Why is that? Well, it's because it's not a spray. And I'm calling out chemtrail believers on this. They all say, what are they spraying? That's a loaded question. You need to put down those loaded questions. Those are one of the primary tools to get people to buy into faulty premises and then get them to just follow you over a cliff. Echo Charlie, happy birthday. 6/21/2023, you are a Cancer. All right, we're also discussing, now I don't know if this means anything, but Elon Musk is always using numbers and in his nerdy way, like 42 on all of his rockets. And now his rockets all have 33 engines, very significant because the rocket's symbolic meaning. But he often brings up the number 69, and I think the number has everything to do with Cancer, the crab, and the solstice. It's because this cult worships these dates. They have a fixation on them for some reason. Okay, moving on. Going through my notes here. They have less than 12 hours left, so we're going to have some kind of resolution on this soon. Now, there was a Freudian slip, but I think it might have been authorized. I don't know if you heard this. Congresswoman Stacey Plaskett, she said Donald Trump needs to be shot, stopped. Donald Trump needs to be shot, stopped. So she meant stopped, right? But she accidentally said shot. Erica Bear says, regardless of what they're spraying. No, they're not spraying. What I'm saying is, if you're saying they're spraying, you're suggesting that there's something in the vehicle that's coming out of it. That it's squirting it, it's spraying it on you. And I'm saying, no, there's nothing in it. And you can tell by zooming in that the trails don't immediately come out of the spigot. They have to form. It's condensation trails. And this is a fact. And the thing is about facts is they're kind of persistent. And chemtrail is mostly conjecture. And people ask, what are they spraying all day long? And it's like, you got to stop asking these questions that presume the premise has been established that there is a spray. There is no spray. And then they'll say, well, these things have covered up our skies. Well, maybe not. The cirrus clouds they create are created because the environmental conditions were already there. They don't bring the rain, they indicate it. You can actually use condensation trails as a predictive tool because now you know a little bit about climatic conditions at high altitudes. And when I say observable, testable, repeatable, 18% of flights have these. And it correlates with the right atmospheric conditions. And one of the things that really made me take this perspective is the military planes don't make these trails. And so people say, well, they must not have the chemtrail juice on them. No, it's because since the advent of military planes, they have steadfastly avoided those altitudes because it would make them easy targets. Joined by D-Rec, says, you mustn't see my comments. Who are you going to sue this week? Well, the last person I sued was someone who had hacked my Kickstarter account, attempted to hack my Patreon, hacked my WordPress, Vimeo, Gravatar, and had engaged in a 4-year-long pattern of online cyberstalking. That was the last person that I sued. Intersection says they sprayed hard at sunrise yesterday, Cleveland, Ohio. Again, they didn't spray. So intersections, if you get your hands on a plane and you inspect it, you would see what I'm talking about here. Like there is no mechanism by which a spray would be loaded into this thing. There's no additive in the fuel. What is being observed from the ground are the effects of the hot jet exhaust in the cold air. I'm not going to spend too much more time on it, but I think it's interesting that the chemtrail theory is so popular that it's never censored. I'm like, what's with these conspiracy theories that never get censored? Maybe these are things they want you to believe. And I realize it's this. They want you to believe in anthropogenic climate change. And you don't believe Greta, you're like, no, Greta's a fool. I don't believe Al Gore. That's all fake. There's no way. Man can't cause climate change. But then you turn around and you're like, well, actually he does. Geoengineering. They all do it. And I don't believe that condensation trails cause climate change. And I don't believe in geoengineering to the extent that chemtrail believers do. Because it's just a replacement belief for too much CO2 makes Gaia mad. You're basically espousing the environmentalist main talking point that they have fought decades to get people to believe without evidence. And you're believing it for the wrong evidence, but you're still believing it. Benton says, chemtrail lives matter. I think a lot of people have a hard time admitting that they're wrong or that they can be wrong. If you think you can't be tricked, you've obviously been tricked. Rocco Calzone says, it's easier to fool a man than convince him he's been fooled. Mark Twain. Yep. Now, they do create cloud cover. Condensation trails are man-made clouds, and they do linger. Do they affect your quality of life? Are they causing climate change? No. Although chemtrail believers say so. And now, I used to say that this was to merge the left and the right, and it's actually happening. Because as of last year, NASA's been saying condensation trails are actually the main cause of global warming. Javo82 says chemtrail believers should stay in their house if they're so scared, like people who wear masks. Intersection says, I do not doubt my eyes and years of experience. I can help you. Your eyes aren't special. You're a human. I know how your eyes work. If you go to a beach, Intersections, and these are facts, and you look at a boat, your eyes will tell you that they went over the hump and that you're on a ball. Do you doubt your eyes? If you don't, then you will end up thinking you live on a ball, and you might have years of experience seeing boats go over the horizon. If you don't doubt your eyes, then you can be fooled. Magic shows are designed to fool the human eye. You have to deal with stage magic, sleight of mind, optical illusions, sleight of hand. So the fact that you think your eyes can tell you the truth without any kind of rationally parsing of the perceptions because of other factors, like, for example, angular resolution, then you can be tricked. Because boats don't go over the horizon. You bring out a P900 and they come back. They come back into view. And that's because your eyes aren't able to distinguish these objects from the horizon after a certain distance. Doesn't mean they went over. So your eyes might be telling you that the planes are spraying something, but that's a sleight of mind trick when they say, what are they spraying? Because they're not spraying, they're creating something. Sort of like a boat. If a boat goes at a high rate of speed, it leaves a wake. You think the fish are debating whether or not they're being sprayed with chemicals because of these lingering wakes? Into the Break says contrails don't curve. Yes, they're absolutely flat. Clouds are flat. Clouds are flat. I can look at clouds 120 miles away from where I am, and they are level with the ground that I'm standing on. They don't curve over any supposed hump, which is weird for those who believe that boats go over the hump. How do you explain it? If your boats went over the hump, and I'm seeing clouds 100 miles away that are level, then your friends on the boat must be looking at clouds at like a 45-degree angle. Anyway, chemtrail activism is so 1999 government-approved establishment conspiracy theory, X-Files plotline. I'm not even interested in it, but I am interested in debunking it based on the logical fallacies that go into creating this misperception. And it's a misperception by design. They want you to be afraid of the sky. They want you to think the skies are ugly, that it's just that our world's been destroyed by capitalism. It's part of this cultural pessimism where everything's polluted, everything's dirty, we got to get off the grid. They're trying to get you to hate what we've done to the world just as they want you to hate yourself because you're a carbon super spreader. I happen to think condensation trails are beautiful. I think it's like watercolor to me. I mean, I look at it as a watercolorist as, aesthetically somewhat pleasing. They don't irritate me at all. And the fact that they form grids, it's not ominous. It's because the streets that you live on are grids. So are the paths connecting these airports. But there are so many fallacies here that I think we need to solve them or crack these little puzzles because these are constantly being used. And when you see through how they do a trick, you don't fall for it again. So for example, the people who think that Stu Peters is legit, they think everybody who died from the pokey because X came before Y, therefore X caused Y. Now that is the fallacy at work behind the people who think that if you boil vinegar, it clears your skies of chemtrails. Well, they're not chemtrails, but even if they were, how does boiling vinegar on your lawn or in a fire pit in your backyard, how does that clear your skies? Well, ask Crow 777. He says this, he does this, and he claims some days he feels like he's a cockroach being sprayed from above. So he brings out his vinegar, he boils it, and they go away. Now, I believe this was actually started by David Weiss from deep inside the rabbit hole. And he said, I tried it and it worked. And I've also seen people pray and say, oh, look, I made it go away. Now, the problem with this is it's no different than, let's just say, a high priest saying, yeah, there's an eclipse. And if you don't let me rip the heart out of a virgin, it's going to stay perpetually dark. So thank God they let him rip that heart out because then the sun came out again. No, it was going to happen anyway. And if you know it's going to happen anyway, and you claim that your actions cause it, you can get gullible people to think you're magic. So here you have this witch doctor character, Crow 777, boiling vinegar and dancing around it like one of those COVID nurses, and then the clouds just disappear, like some kind of, negative rain dance. And it's, again, false causality. Alan Smith says, Tim, Dr. Shiva's assistant has been trying to contact you. My number is on the site, ips.monster. I saw that he's running for president. And yeah, we should definitely talk, because he's very informed about a lot of the things we talk about here. And before we get into the 2024 election cycle, I want to kind of get our, get a good glimpse of the field and everybody who's in. And I want to know if there are any who are a PSYOP aware, and to what extent. Angst G says, geoengineering is the nightmarish counter-narrative to the global warming nonsense. Exactly. You take the red pill, you believe in geoengineering, anthropogenic climate change. You take the woke pill, and people say, what is woke? And people on the right are mocked for not being able to define it. Wokeism is leftism. It's that simple. Now, if you take the woke pill, you take the left pill, you believe in climate change. What's the difference? Well, one blames the other side. The climate change people blame the Republicans. The red pillars think that liberal oligarchs, rich people like George Soros or Bill Gates are doing the climate change. So you notice how left blames right, right blames left. Woke people think that the right wing is destroying the world. Red pill think that rich left wing trillionaires are doing it. And many of these big lies you can debunk with nothing more than argumentation. You don't need to bring facts or counterfacts to debunk a claim that hasn't been established by facts. Hitchens' razor, that which has been, and Hitchens' razor, it's sort of a version of Occam's razor, but that has been asserted without facts can be dismissed without facts. You don't have to, as I say, the Fepe's razor, you don't have to debunk that which hasn't been bunked. The burden of proof isn't yours, and they always push it on you. I had some chemtrailer today on Twitter trying to push it on me. He's like, oh, just look up. You don't believe me? Look up. Another one said that the sun is in the clouds. And I said, and that's a common one. A lot of the biblical flat earth people will say, you see the sun, it's in the clouds. No, it looks like it's in the clouds. Just like boats look like they go over the horizon. One of the things about auto-hoaxing and deconstructing media, it's recognizing these blind spots. Well, one of the blind spots is the limitations of human perception and when your senses can be tricked. We live on a massive magic show. That's the best way to describe it. And a magic show, if it's done right, is undebunkable from the position of the ticket buyer who's in the seats. That's why you buy it. You want to be fooled. You go there to be tricked. You want something that can be undebunkable from where you sit. And if you went backstage, you would see how it worked. And that's kind of what we do here is we recognize this is all a show, and it only works if you look at it from the perspective that they want you to see it. In other words, the mainstream media frame. When you step out of their frame, you can see the magic show. Most people don't know it's a show. But I will reach out to Dr. Shiva. I want to be very much involved in, and all of our reporters will be involved in covering not just the 2024 circus, but I want to cover those that are covering it. What we're doing, what auto-hoaxology, what it represents here, is reality testing the claims of the media, which means we're not just regurgitating talking points and giving an alternative view, which is what alternative media does. We're actually questioning the apparatus that tells us what's going on, specifically each of its various pundits, most of whom are dupes. There are dupes and agents. They're not all dupes. Some of them are actually diabolical agents. I mean, you'd have to be. You'd have to be diabolical to sign off on the PSYOP entertainment complex, knowing that it ritualistically terrorizes children all the time for political control. We talked about this the other day. Someone had said, what's the point of all this? What's the point of all the mind war in the theater? It's the instrument of monarchy. They use, the elite, they use all the techniques, the pageantry, the mythology of religion and superstition to control the masses because they believe the masses can't control themselves. They think that we're intrinsically unreasonable, so it's easier to scare us into being good people. Okay, going through some comments. This thing on Twitter has been blowing up. It's blowing up as we go right now, this whole Titanic sinking thing. And I looked at one side of it. The Titanic 2 is how it's being described on the Drudge Report. We've compared it to Jaws. We've compared it to Apollo 13. And these are all just different things that connected to the same body of symbols and the same idea. And now for Putin to come out waving around Satan 2 really completes the picture here. Finding out that James Cameron dived into the ocean to check out the Titanic 33 times just further correlates how much correlates with the significance of the towers, the Twin Towers, and their connection to the Titanic, among other things. But I believe we've covered most of the points I wanted to get to. The concurrent programming in Black Mirror's Beyond the Sea, the movie The Abyss, and how that relates right now to the situation with Russia, the fact that it's a solstice, very symbolically significant here, the crab, James Cameron's work depicting underwater aliens, deep space aliens, I Can't Breathe being the main theme of Avatar 2, Gaia Can't Breathe, and now we're looking at an asphyxiation tragedy. Ocean Gate, the company, which ties into Stranger Things, the Watergate, where the Russians have their Demogorgon. This connects to Hunt for Red October, A Loose Submarine, more Tom Clancy, who also has 9/11 predictive programming in his works. The Way of Water and Atlantis, and here's the Atlantic Ocean. And we talked about the Atlanta PSYOP in Cop City. And then all of the references to the Challenger, the Deep Sea Challenger, and the numbers that correlate to the Challenger all suggest that this is a manufactured tragedy. And when you look at the demographic breakdown, and this was commented on by many, it is diverse by design because, quote, nobody wants to, as they said, no one's going to find 50-year-old white guys inspirational. So they deliberately chose a diverse group, and some are saying this is, of course, what you get when you put external characteristics over just ability. But I think it's because, again, like the Challenger, it was a mix. Male, female, racially diverse. Ellen Smith says, you got to hear how Dr. Shiva tears up Booby, Bobby Kennedy, and Trump. Yeah, Bob Kennedy, Robert Kennedy Jr., major league environmentalist, environmental lawyer. Like that's strange. That's a strange pivot to me. And then he gets the favor of the right, or the people who are just anti-left, the anti-vaxxers. They line up behind him, and then he runs as a Democrat against their guy Trump. Very perplexing. You know, you're expecting JFK Jr., you get RFK Jr. Kind of disappointing. All right, I think we've covered quite a lot, and there's going to be more tomorrow for sure. If you want to keep follow any of this, go into the Discord server and get into the Gilded, because we are posting stuff as we find it. And there are so many elements to the story, it's not quite over yet. CEO of OceanGate explains the company didn't want to hire, quote, experienced 50-year-old white guys because they weren't inspirational. Now think about it. 5 white billionaires dying in the ocean. Not going to get a lot of sympathy from the woke left. But then you have a mixed group, and it's deliberately chosen to be exclusive of whites. And now you have a tragedy. Okay, there are so many other things, but I just really did want to focus on this James Cameron. Again, it is the solstice, first day of summer, and the world was supposed to end, according to Greta Thunberg. It's supposed to actually end today. Hasn't yet. And the ocean levels did rise. I know they've been predicting it for 35 years, and we're always like, oh, the ocean levels haven't gone up. The elite still live, in the beaches, and the insurance rates don't go up for people who live near the beaches. Like, there's no assumption that the water levels are going to rise, but they did go up detectably about 1 millimeter because of the PPE dumped in the ocean, mostly by the liberal left. If you think about who's really responsible for all of the pollution when it comes to PPE, it would have been the libs. Like, they did it. So I say, lock up the climate change activists. All right, thank you all for joining. Alan Smith, here's your wrench. If you're in the chat and you've said anything at all, I'll be handing out a wrench. And also, go to ips.monster and get on the newsletter so you get the archives immediately after. We're going to have open phones here in a couple of days. I'm getting situated in a new headquarters here in the next week or so. And we're going to do the morning live streams and evenings open phones. And I'm going to set it up in the office for the IPR press club to have our meetings. We're going to start sending our reporters out there doing deep dives. And if you didn't know, the emperor penguin is the deepest diving bird on the plane. Thank you for joining. We'll have probably a live chat in Discord.